Well, hello! Today, a new product from Eachine. But before we get into it, a quick reminder to please like or dislike this video if you didn't like it. Comment down below, don't forget to subscribe and click on the little bell icon which tells you when I'm uploading videos. So, what have we got here in this seemingly innocuous box with an Eachine logo? It is the Wizard X140 HV. Yes, a little 3-inch quad that will take from 3 to 6S lipos. And I should just explain straight off the back, I don't own any 6S lipos. I've got like 1, 2, 3, 4S, but I've never gone beyond that. Maybe this will change my mind, but let's open it up first, see what we've actually got. Well, there's a bunch of stuff on top. Great news so far that we've got the Dow Cyclone 3056 props. Really like the Dow Cyclones. I don't know if I've had them in 3-inch or not. Maybe, we'll find out. Some cable ties or zip ties. Some little carbon fibre sort of prop wrenches. We got one of the Eachine battery things that I always put on wrong anyway, so I won't be using that. A bunch of screws, probably spares, and some prop nuts. And finally, nicely embedded in the foam there, you've got the little quad itself. So let's grab this out. Straight away, just holding it, I'm thinking this is a solid little beastie. What's it weigh? Using my not particularly accurate old kitchen scales here. Without a lipo, I get 142 grams on here, so should be able to keep it under 250, I guess. Anyway, what we get on here is 1507 2500 kV motors, and they are super tight. You get that really nice feeling when you turn them. I was excited to see that the camera is a Foxeer Arrow. So this is a proper CCD camera with a 1.8mm lens, which sounds really wide angle, but I used it in another quad and it was a fantastic camera. Then we got some pretty standard things. We've got an F4 flight controller, a 20 amp ESC board, we've got VTX that supports smart audio, and apparently we've got this little sort of, hopefully you can see there's a sort of coloured circle or coloured outline around this which lights up, which is interesting. One thing we don't get with it, and you can see we've got this little servo cable hanging around, is a receiver. And I'm just looking at the quad and there is not much space to put one. I thought, oh, maybe I'll put one on top, but because that whole thing lights up at the bottom and there's no real place to put the battery strap, it looks like the battery wants to go on top. But yeah, we'll have to think about exactly how that goes on, but that's the next thing. Got a little sleeve dipole here for the VTX, which is kind of hanging around a bit. We might have to secure that down. And XT30 again, of course. These battery straps are reasonably big, because I guess if you were looking at a 6S battery, even the small ones take up quite an amount. So you've got the ability to carry quite a big load here. As I said, I haven't got any 6S lipos, so I'm going to have to fly this on 4S to see how it feels. Now, if you guys are really interested to see it on 6S, and depending how well it performs on 4S, then I'll either try and get some the correct size 6S, or I will make a series cable with some XT30s and put a couple of 3S's in series on there and see how that goes. But for now, I think I'm going to have to get this apart to see where I'm going to try and get a receiver in, which is going to have to be an XM Plus. And once we've got that sorted out, we'll get it onto Beta Flight and get it configured. Join me in a second. Okay, here's a quick look through Beta Flight. Just a couple of slightly weird things, but it was pretty straightforward. So port usage was set up as you'd expect, with Serial RX on UART1, TBS Smart Audio on UART2, D-Shot 600 with motor stop, an 8K 2K loop, and weirdly it had soft serial activated along with OSD, anti-gravity and dynamic filter. It's only running Beta Flight 3.5.5, nothing wrong with that, but quite early for a sort of up-to-date quad, if you like. PIDs seem to have some sort of little changes here and there. I've just upped the super rate to 0.8 as normal to give myself a 1000 max velocity in degrees. Receiver wise, the radio's not on at the moment, but I've installed an XM Plus in there, so I've put RSSI on channel 16, aux 12. Now, modes was one of the really weird pages. Thanks to the people that reminded me there's this little button here which you can get rid of your non-used modes just to show what I've actually got, which is arm angle, horizon beeper, air mode, flip over after crash, all my normal ones. The initial mode they actually had looked like this, and it basically had a 2-channel flick into angle, but nothing for arming or anything. Really, really weird. OSD was similarly weird, where they had almost nothing in there, just the warnings. So I've put in all the normal gubbins. Yeah, and that's about it really, not much to say, so let's get on and do the actual flying part. Well, not flying straight away, because when I looked at the goggles just to check the OSD layout, I saw we had another OSD. This is the Foxeer camera itself overlaying an OSD, which is pretty nice, but obviously we don't want it on R1. The problem was that Eachine didn't give us any sort of cable to connect to the camera to turn it off. So, what to do? Well, here's a roundabout way of fixing things. Here's the 140, and you notice we've removed the camera, and we've transported it over here to the Hobbymate Comet, because this has got this flying lead, of which I found a RunCam OSD, which seems to do the job. Why wasn't this already set? Or why at least didn't you have something to set it with? And from that point, it was really just a case of going into the OSD, turning off the bits you don't want, and then checking it all works, which it does. But hey, if you're not me and you don't have this quad that already had the similar camera, you're a bit scuppered at that point. Okay, well, just while I've been fixing it here on the floor, I thought I'd get one of my typical batteries. This is an 854S, not particularly big, and I figure if you've got a smaller 6S, it's going to be bigger still. But however, when I try and put it on, well, the straps aren't big enough. You haven't got any. You've just got spiky, and you haven't got the fluffy, so it doesn't work. We're going to need a different battery strap. Well, I thought it'd be useful to show you what we finally ended up with, because it seems like it's quite different than the original. So, as far as fitting the receiver in, I initially wanted to go just underneath here, and the XM Plus would just about fit in, but wouldn't comfortably go in the orientation I wanted it to, so I ended up putting it here just underneath the VTX. And to do that, it meant I had to move the XT30 cable. I've just moved it to the side here, which kind of makes sense in this sort of thing. The other thing was that I didn't like the wobbliness of having that little UFO connector and just flopping about there, so I've just put a cable tie, one of the ones in the pack, and just heat shrink that in so it took any of the stress out of there. XM Plus wise, I routed these round to the arms. I was going to have them coming out here, but it felt like it was a bit too much in the way. As it is, I think I've got these a little bit too long. I don't think I quite need that much going out. But, you know, you get the idea of doing that. Meantime, as I already discussed, these little straps were fairly hopeless for two reasons, actually. Now, one was they wouldn't go round a battery, and I don't think an 854S is particularly big when you think about the size that a 6S has to go. Perhaps they're using really small 6S batteries. But what I did, I've put this AC strap on, which has a nice sort of rubberizer underneath, and that holds in really nice and tightly. And what I've also done is I've just built it under the frame, because what it was using, there's these little slots here and here, but those slots are quite a way in, so you can't actually fit a battery in there, so it will go off to one side, and it's just not good. I've also just used one of the battery mats that was in the package. I've just cut some little notches out so it'll go around the screws, and that provides a nice base for it. Camera wise, obviously we fixed that now, and we've poked it up at about that angle. I'll check that in the field, but it seems quite reasonable for the 1.8mm lens. But yeah, finally we're ready to fly it at last. So looking forward to actually seeing what this thing will do. Now, it's been a little bit of a hassle to put it together, I have to say, to say it's just plug and play. And I should mention the lit up outline. You can't really see it in daylight, and you can see if I let the LED show how overpowering it is. However, turn the lights off and it's pretty cool. It's still completely overpowered by the proper LED, but it's quite a cool thing. You just won't see it unless you're flying at night. Well, here we are finally. Yay, we're going to test it out. I'm in this quite thin field, really overgrown. Don't want to go down in that stuff. I have to say I was a bit rattled driving here, because it's about half an hour away from my house, and the amount of green space I have to drive past to come to a space I've actually got permission to use is just so annoying. I don't know what we're going to do about this. Anyway, it's not a very exciting field. There's cows over there where I once crashed a plane and they ate it, so I will try not to do that. Let's just have a whip around and see how this goes. But I'll have a quick line of sight first, because I haven't even hovered this yet, and we'll go from there. Well, I just did a line of sight flight, but it turned out I was not recording, so let's try it again. And we didn't do much, we did a couple of circles.
felt pretty good. I'll try not to go into myself. There we did a little couple of punches, so let me bring it over here. 1, 2, 3 and punch. There we go. God, that wind took it. One more of those and go. Whee. That was about it.
So let's get up for that maiden flight. And the first thing that instantly struck me straight away before anything else is, wow, this is a nice camera. I've been so used to flying the little Caddx EOS 2s and other micro cameras that I haven't had a decent one for a while, and I really like this Foxeer one from the last quad, the Comet, and it has not let me down. It's really nice. The other thing I noted is that I am needing quite a lot of throttle, so I'm thinking, you know, this battery's maybe a little big, or it really does need 6S to do stuff. It's a little bit hard to tell because, of course, there was no recommendations about battery from Eachine. There was just like, this will support this batteries, but there's no indication that you shouldn't fly it. And you can see how heavy it was and how I mistimed everything just here. Fortunately though, this has an inbuilt beeper, so it's no hassle to find even in the long grass. So okay, the battery's a bit heavy, but let's focus on how it actually flies. And the answer to that is pretty good actually. There's no hassles with the tune out of the box. It feels very smooth and it feels very responsive. Obviously, because of that extra weight, it's kind of missing the top end of the throttle and that ability to punch, but sort of in a straight line, it goes nice and quick and it's very responsive. As far as batteries go, I try and keep a decent range of batteries in, but there's just too many sizes and shapes of quads. So generally speaking, in most 3-inch quads, I've been able to fly 850 mAh 4S, and it's absolutely been fine. And in slightly smaller ones, I use a 650 3S, and that's been good. This one even needs a smaller 4S battery, maybe something around the 500, 600 size, or a 6S battery, which isn't that heavy. Obviously, I'll have more power to offset the weight, but I don't know what the right size is here. That's why it would be really handy for manufacturers to actually say, this is what we feel you should do. But I was having a great little fly around, even in this sort of, you know, compressed space in the field. As with most things, I spend a lot of time trying to find a little bit of proximity to work with. So I like getting low down the grass, along the trees, finding a few trees to go in and out of, that sort of thing, seeing how it did in a couple of manoeuvres. And to be fair, even though it's weighty, as long as you give it full thrust up, you've got plenty of float time to do manoeuvres and things. What you just can't do is let it fall and not forget to pull out until the last moment, because the gravity and inertia will keep taking you downwards. So you've got to arrest that drop pretty quick on this size and power of battery. So although it comes off as being a little bit heavy with this battery, flight times are pretty good. Mostly around 4 minutes. You can go much longer if cruising. And I'm sort of flying medium. I'm sort of getting along nice and quick. I'm sort of doing some punches, doing some manoeuvres, that sort of thing. And still we're getting a decent flight time. And I did find myself once or twice getting it a little bit close to the greenery, which makes a nice splat on the camera lens. Little tip, always have some sort of cloth in your bag, because the amount of times I'm pulling crap, grass, moisture off the lens and other bits, it's always really handy to have one. Failing anything, there's normally a lens cloth in your Fat Shark goggle case. Use that if you're stuck. I did my first 3 batteries on 25 milliwatts, and really there was no reason to change it. But I just wanted to see and make sure we had no interference or anything bad happened when we upped the power. So I did battery number 4 in 200 milliwatts, and everything was fine. I didn't actually see any difference in the picture. I'm not flying
either far away from myself or behind any obstacles where the power output's actually going to matter. It's just, I really do like this camera. It's really nice. And obviously it's nice and noise free, so we've got a nice clean build here. Now this is not always the case with the Eachine stuff. I remember a lot of the Wizards. I had the 220, is that what it was? I can't remember. Another sort of 200 size quad, and it was awful for noise. It was really poor, and the camera was very poor, and so they seem to be in various iterations managing to do a lot better with the build quality they've got. Basically they've stopped using their own stuff and they're putting in some decent named products. Now I did actually take a 3S battery with me as well, and that's because on the occasional 3-inch build I've had where it's used very small motors, the weight of a 4S battery versus the power has not been good for it. On this particular quad, obviously the kV of the motor is not as high as you might like it to be, so you can see the amount of throttle I've got to keep it in the air. We're sort of 60-70% to fly along. I mean, it's perfectly flyable, it's quite docile, but you'd have to really watch the manoeuvres. You can't just go into a dive and come out of it in any reasonable sense. It's like it's a bit like flying the old way. I remember when I started off on a great big ZMR 250 frame on tiny little motors and a 3S 1.3 amp. When you did a dive, you started pulling out way before you got close to the ground. It's more of a sort of graceful, smooth curve out of it rather than just punching out at the end. Normally I would say this is docile and it's okay for a beginner, but this quad is not really set up for a 3S by any means, and I cut the flight quite short because it's like, well, this is no good. No one's going to really want to do this. They're going to want to do higher voltage and more cells. That said, despite the perhaps lack of decent battery, still a good morning's flying.
Now, I do have a correction to make. I know, I never make mistakes, but there you go. I've mentioned during the video several times that Eachine didn't actually give us any recommendations about what battery to use. It's not true. If you look carefully at the Banggood listing, you will see that it says their recommended capacity is 450 to 750 milliamp hours. Hence, this 851 is too big. What did you expect? So, sorry about that, but at the same time, it's like, okay, 450 to 750, but they haven't really given, like, is 750 a 6S or is 450 a 3S? Which is it? So I kind of stand by what I said. It should really be a lot more detail about what cells equal what capacity, because I can say quite happily that a 650 3S doesn't really do you any favours. Now, as far as getting this under the 250 mark, not really. So I weighed it as being 142 grams, and then I put all the props and the prop nuts and the bits and pieces on, and it got to 160. So when I used the sort of underpowered 3S battery, 232 grams. So yay, that's doable. But my 850 4S came up at 270 grams. Of course, 850 is a bit heavy. I'm struggling to see what the best one is. Maybe something around a 500, and maybe that'll just about bring you in the 250. But is it going to be powerful enough? Is the weight reduction versus the power going to be good, or do you actually need a 6S? We'll come to that in a sec. Because I wanted to talk about like what's good, what's bad about this, normal sort of stuff. So on the bad side, I can pretty much summarise it as a bit of a ball ache to set up. Why was that? So it wasn't too obvious about where the RX should fit in. It's pretty well populated when you get it, and there was just a little space there, and I couldn't really get the RX in, and it didn't want to go on top because the battery didn't want to be underslung because of the whole lighty up thing. So, again, just clearer details about where the suggestion was about where to put stuff would always be appreciated. Obviously, the Foxeer camera was left with the OSD display on. Now, that wouldn't be so bad if they actually gave you the cable to change it on, but they didn't. And it's not like everyone's got these cables lying around and can just plug them in and sort it out. That's a bit of an oversight. I mean, really, the camera should have been set up so the OSD was already turned off. That's just, bad quality control or laziness or something like that. But That was annoying, because you have to sort of open up again, go in, sort it out, and if you haven't got the lead, it's not an obvious thing you'll have lying around. That's a particular type of connector, so didn't like that. The other thing we didn't get on with were the battery straps, and that is not just because of the size of the battery I used. Even if I was using a smaller one, it wouldn't have fit. If you look at this little 650, what I was mentioning before, you've got these little slots here, and that's where the battery straps went. So if you imagine you have to go around there, but the battery is as wide as that, so already it was trying to squash the battery into an angle that didn't work. So that bit didn't work very well. But on the good stuff, once you got it going, I must talk about the camera. I love this camera. It's really nice. When I first heard about the Foxeer 1.8mm, I thought that's going to be all distorty and horrible and I'm not going to like it. But I really do. It's a really nice camera. And you can have it angled up at a decent angle, and you can still see reasonably well to pick your landing point out. You saw in that field there was a lot of long grass I didn't want to land in. I wanted to land in a very specific spot, and that was no problem. And going hand in hand with the camera, you notice we had really nice clean video, which is fantastic. And as I said before, Eachine hasn't always had that. It's had some really noisy, horrible stuff in the past. I really have not liked it. I like this a lot. This is, I think, my favourite camera of the moment. The flying was very nice. So out of the box, didn't do any changes on the tuning or anything, and it flew really nicely. Fairly smooth, felt reliable in what you were doing. Despite the extra weight of the battery being heavy, it still felt fairly predictable about how it was going to react, and that's always good. And finally, it had an actual physical beeper. I haven't had a physical beeper in a quad for ages, been doing these micro things, and it's like, oh, that is so easy to find. When it went down in a long grass, I was like, uh-oh. And then I had the beeper, and I found it in no time at all. Yay, beepers. So overall, I do like it, but I don't really think I've given it the full review, because I've basically put in a battery that is too heavy for it and slightly underpowered. So I need to come back and fly it in 6S in some way. What I did last night was go through my spare parts things and find I had a few XT30 pairs, so I can make up an XT30 series cable. And one thing I can instantly do is put two 3S batteries together and chuck it on there, which is slightly bigger than the 850 but gives more power. Otherwise I'm down to like just a 300 milliamp hour 3S in series, so it's not perfect. I don't know of any 6S batteries that are that small at the moment. I'll have a chat to some friends and see what's around there, but yeah, at the moment I like it. I like the way it flies. I don't like what it needed to set up and stuff, but I'll be back testing this with a different power setup just to see how it goes. In the meantime, this has been the Eachine Wizard X140 HV, and it was kindly supplied for review by Banggood, so thanks to them. There are links down below, and there is a voucher to get money off that expires at the end of this month, so check out that if you're interested in it. But I hope that's been helpful, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye for now.
Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.